Good morning, YouTube, and welcome back to Possum Farms. This morning I've got a project behind me that is about a year coming. We purchased this 1951 John Deere 420C crawler so that I could use the blade that's on it and help me make a pond, and it quit. Had problems, and I was in a hurry, and so we went and rented a Kubota skid steer and put a big old bucket on the front of it and went to town, and we built an entire pond down there, you may have seen in some of our other videos. And so this has been sitting here, and I tried getting it running, had a friend of mine trying to get it running, and we didn't have much luck. So I'm gonna dive into this, and I've already taken the first steps, trying to diagnose things, because you start with the simple things, right? We're getting spark, so that's not a problem. We've got a fuel issue, and I have removed the carburetor out of it. It's a little updraft carburetor, and I've taken the fuel bowl off of the gas tank, and I've taken all this stuff in the barn, and I've been cleaning it up and blowing it out with air, and now I got to do a carb rebuild, because as you'll see, I got into it and discovered pretty quick that it's been a long time since this thing's been rebuilt. And when I got it, it ran pretty good. It started up just about every time you went and cranked it, and started right up and moved around, and then it quit. Well, we're gonna fix a few problems, so come and hang out with us, and we'll get this 1951 John Deere MC crawler back up and operate. One of the first things we looked at was the gas tank. With alcohol fuels the way they are, and how they congeal and cause corrosion, we went in, cleaned this tank out, and took out the little fuel bowl that's right down here, and cleaned it all out, and I'm pretty sure that there's not much crud left in there. We got some stuff out, but it wasn't much, luckily. And that's where the carburetor was, and went and stuffed some paper towels in there to keep the bugs out. So let's go take a look at this carburetor. We're going to clean this carburetor up and make sure it works. Just to give you an idea how cruddy the fuel system is, this is the little glass bowl that is in the bottom of the fuel tank that goes to the carburetor and everything. And yeah, that's not looking so good. So I'm gonna go and take this and drop it in this little cup here, and run my parts washer through it. I've got a little parts washer from Harbor Freight, and we'll let that run for a while. We're going to take these pieces and dunk them off into the mineral spirits is what we use. And I've already disassembled the carburetor here, and we're going to go and drop things in and let them get clean. Nice thing about this with the little pump, you just pretty much let it go and let it do its thing. We'll see how it looks in a couple hours. It's a couple hours later. Let's take a look at what it looks like. Ooh, that's not good. Yeah, it's gonna have to stay in there a lot longer. Well, it's 3 days later. Let's see what kind of difference it made. Okay, now that's clean. All that crud has been melted away, and it's taken 3 days of sitting in this cup with this pumping mineral spirits across it. So I think it was pretty messed up. Now we're going to take the 2 halves of the carburetor. They've been sitting in this stuff for days. We're going to go and scrub them up, clean them up, get all the crud off of them, and yeah, the lighting's probably not real good, but you get the idea. Basically, all I've done is put it into the mineral spirits and let it sit. And all that crud that was on there is magically gone. I mean, even the gasket faces and everything are nice and clean. Mineral spirits does a good job. Now I get to go and blow a little bit of air in here through all the orifices and stuff and make sure everything is still flowing. And pretty much the same for here. Uh-oh. That's not a good sign. That's wobbling around quite a bit. Looks like I'm going to need a rebuild kit. I was just going to get gaskets, but I'm going to have to get a rebuild kit. Which isn't a bad thing, because this is the original carb, you know, from 1951. So I'll excuse it for needing a rebuild. And it looks like it's been a really long time since it's had a rebuild, so we'll see how this goes. Okay, a little schmutz. A little more brush, a little more rinse, and it'll be ready to go and put back together on the tractor. And we're back. After 3 days of sitting in the parts washer with circulating mineral spirits going through it, we got this fuel system clean. There's a copper tube fuel line that goes from the fuel tank to the carburetor. We went and soaked that and cleaned it out too. And we've gone and cleaned and burnished the 2 halves, making sure everything's nice and clean and there's no remnants of old gaskets and crud left behind. And here's all my little parts from when I took it apart. Now there's one interesting thing to note. This little thing, I'm sure you can't see it, but this is the needle for fuel metering. And the one that's supposed to be on here has a little groove at the top so that you go and put this little spring clip in it so that it hooks around the float so it'll actually follow the float. And in 1951 they didn't do that, they just relied on gravity. And so this tells me that this carburetor has not been rebuilt either ever or in a very, very long time, because the update for that little slot with the little spring clip came out in about 1960, 1959. So yeah, we're dealing with a very original carburetor. So now I need to go and find a rebuild kit to go fix it up. Here I've got a screen. For some reason this fuel bowl never had a screen. There's a little stainless steel screen and a gasket. The fuel bowl never had a gasket, which I'm really surprised about, which explains why it would drip and leak like a sieve. When I took it apart, the gasket is literally about to crumble in my hands. It's the original thickness, but it's so brittle. I was really careful taking it off, and it's obvious that this needs replacing. And this is the one for the carburetor going to the intake manifold. And obviously this has been on and off and on and off multiple times. So I'm guessing it's time to replace that. I went and got on Steiner's tractor and ordered a kit, and then I discovered that it may be as long as 2 weeks till I got my order. And then I went and looked on Amazon, and they had an overnight deal where you order it today, you know, by this time today, and it will be in your mailbox tomorrow. And it's on its way. So I guess we'll be back when I get the rebuild kit and start to go after this. Ever have one of those days when you're impatient? You can't wait on Amazon? Well, I'm taking this opportunity to go and take some steel wool and go after the brass venturi, and it's amazing. It looks not necessarily polished, but it's a heck of a lot prettier than it was. I almost wasn't sure if it was brass or not, and now it actually looks brass. Let's blow some air through this thing. Now that we've shot this with 150 psi of air and blown out all of the little jets and venturis and vents and everything on both sides, now I gotta wait on Amazon and Steiner Tractor. Well, through the magic of video editing, it's a couple of days later, and Amazon's kit showed up, and it's the basic kit, which is I think all I need. The master kit for everything is coming from Steiner Tractor, and got an email this morning it'll be here in a week. So now that I've got the parts and I'm looking at it, I went and pulled out the little metering jet and pulled out the little drain valve on the bottom of it, of the carb, and I'm gonna have to remove the butterflies, so that's what I'm fixing to do now. And as I discovered, this goes click, 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 and it shouldn't have near that much play. That tells me that the bushing and the packing are gone on the little axle assembly, so we'll get to take that apart and check that out. Got two screws down inside here. They're supposed to be locked down with Loctite. Ooh, that's not a good sign. That wasn't even difficult. And that was one. And the second one wasn't tight either. It wasn't loose, but it wasn't tight, and boy, you could tell that there was no Loctite on there. Okay, I got the 2 screws loose. Drop them on the table. And I always like to mark a little score mark. That way I know which way to put it back in. This has a little indentation on it for idle, and that's pretty clean. It's got a little indentation down here at the bottom. That's for letting some air by for idling, and that's lined up with where the 255 is stamped into it, and I've made a little score mark just so I remind myself to go and put it back in the same orientation. Now that's actually pretty clean, but I'm going to go and take it over to the wire wheel and burnish it up. And here's the little axle. That appears to be in pretty good shape, although it's dirty and could, you know, use a good cleaning up. And wow, there is no bushing. At least not one that I can see. Well, maybe. And if there is, it's a tiny one. Little bitty tiny bushing. There's some carbon buildup on those screws I'll probably have to do something about. Wow. It feels like there's a groove in there. Well, I'll take that back. Yeah, that may be the bushing. Now I start seeing something brass in there. Gently prying on it. Yep, that's a brass bushing, and there's not a whole heck of a lot of it left. There's not really even enough for me to pry on. That's a little scary. Now that I'm looking through the bore, that could use a good cleaning too. I'm gonna have to go find me a wire brush and put it on my drill, clean out the throat. There we go. A little brass bushing. And I don't see any packing in there at all. And there's supposed to be a little bit of packing around it so that you got something to make a seal. And that's not been working. So we got to clean that up a little bit. Kit from Amazon. Just to make sure things aren't going to run away, I'll lay down a shop towel. There we go. There's a metering jet assembly. We got brand spanking new gaskets that are in actually pretty darn good shape. Put those over there. There's a packing. There's the packing I was talking about. And yeah, all sorts of goodies. We'll have to compare the size of stuff to it. Now I can already see one that needs to be replaced. I've got this one down here. That's been replaced. That was tough. I'm going to clean this up using a little bit of steel wool. I'm guessing we can go and put this back in. Now that we've gone and cleaned up the drain valve, I can go and put that back in. Good and tight, doesn't have to be put on by a gorilla. As I remember, this was about 4.5 to 5 turns out. There's 1, 2, 3. Interesting. Okay. We're going to go tighten this back down. And this is the drain for the very bottom of the carburetor. So you can drain it out for winter time or whatever. Okay, that wasn't too difficult. But we've got a choke butterfly to take care of and some springs and stuff. Gotta take this stuff off so we can go and see what kind of bushings these have got. Okay, it's always a good thing to read the instructions. Now that I know everything fits, I get to take it apart because I need to go and put Loctite on the threads of the screws, and it probably doesn't need it, but the inside of the throat here is a little rusty, and the OCD in me would like to see that going. So now that I know that everything works, I get to go and take it apart and do it again. Well, I don't have a steel bottle brush, and just as I thought, this one's too big, but I found me some coarse steel wool, and that will do in a pinch. Basically all we're trying to do is get the rust and the scale off, because the little butterfly valve is catching on the rust, and anytime the rust gets a little flaky like that, it's just, you know, not a good thing for your engine to eat, that's for sure. Well, it feels a lot smoother. feels significantly smoother than it was. Okay, well now that I got that cleaned off, I can go and start to put things back together again. Now, we've still got our rubber bushing in here, the packing material. And we've got the little bushing in the other seal right there. Now that it's all the way in, I can go and start putting the butterfly valve back in. And remember, that little idle spot there has to go towards the 255 and my mark, and we don't want to get it backwards. Here we go. Just about perfectly aligned. There we go. It's starting to line up. Oops. Almost forgot my Loctite. Now I got some thread locker. Not going to put much on here, just a dab. That's all we need. Whoa, that's more than a dab. Okay, here's one dab. There's another dab. Half a dab. Now I can go and put these back on. There we go. Notice I'm using 2 fingers. Shouldn't take much more torque than that. Okay. And the throttle moves freely. Now I guess we can go and put the rest of it back together. Okay, now that I've gone and found the biggest screwdriver I own just about, well not really the biggest, but almost the biggest, see if I can get this seat module out. I got a new needle. Ah, good, it came right out. It's got a new needle and seat in the rebuild kit. Figured I'd go ahead and use them, because this one's a little gnarly. Got some crud to it. Okay. It's clean. After all that mineral spirits and everything, I think it's probably pretty clean down there. And we've got the seat, which I just pulled out, and there appears to be a little gasket there, maybe. See if I can move that gasket. Doesn't look like the gasket was even there. So, score. Put the little gasket on the seat. Put the seat in there and get it started by hand, just to make sure it's not cross-threaded. Okay, that feels like it's pretty tight. Now, the needle, I don't know if you can see this or not, but right down there on the end is a little clip for a spring. The old one, if it'll focus, never had that. So, yay for innovation. Now this is our float assembly, right here. And we're going to slip it in there, just to see how it's going to fit. Looks like it's going to be alright. We put this needle down in the seat. Go and slide the clip onto here, and then make sure that both sides of it clip onto our float assembly. That didn't work. This is a bit fiddly. Maybe I ought to put it on this first. I've never done this kind of carburetor, so this is all new to me. There we go. And it clips on. There we go. And we need to take the little rod that goes through here for our float assembly. And it should just go right on in. It's not wanting to go right on in. Try it the other direction. Oh, that one's tight. Take the original one, since it's well worn, and put it in its place. And there we go. Now it fits. Now you probably can't see it, but now the little needle will follow that, and it's supposed to be about level, and it's about level. Okay, now that we got that part all put together, let's put our Venturi back together. And there's that. Actually, you know what? I did all that backwards. I did all that backwards, because now I've got to take all that off in order to be able to put my Venturi back, or put the other halves back together. I got ahead of myself. Okay, sounds like the float bowl is flopping around in there. You got to wiggle it a little bit. You can hear it flop around. As long as it flops around, we're good. Now I need to go and put these screws back in. Well, I just went over to the wire wheel and I took all of these screws that hold this thing together and I burnished them because they were kind of rusty and crusty and dirty, and so I cleaned them up and now they look almost new. We can go and start putting them together. These two ought to fit. Yeah, there we go. There's the gasket for the top. I went and burnished the two bolts that hold it onto the tractor. You know what? We forgot something. I got so excited. I forgot something real important. Notice there's a little piece of brass that's sitting in front of me. This is why I lay all the parts out in front, so I won't forget something. But you know, now that we've test fit everything, know that everything fits, I can go and take it apart and put it back together, right? Yeah, that's the excuse we'll use. I was test fitting everything. Okay. And wouldn't you know it, I have to take this back off in order to put the Venturi where it needs to be. So I'm getting a lot of practice putting this all back together. Yeah, we'll go with that. Got the needle lined up in the seat. Got the little rod through with the float. Got the float adjusted, right? And we will carefully put this back down. Yep, float's moving around. Now that we've test fit everything, everything ought to go back together quicker, right? All the threads are cleaned out. Okay, now that I don't have any spare parts sitting here that aren't supposed to be spare parts, we can go try to put it back on the tractor and see how that runs. So yeah, I've got some more work to do. But the carburetor is rebuilt. It's got new seals. ought to work a heck of a lot better than it did. We'll see. I got my fingers crossed. Well, it's about 5:30 in the evening. Been a long, hot day today. And just because I'm the kind of guy that reads instructions afterwards sometimes, I went and looked up the service manual. I've got the owner's manual, the service manual, and the parts manual for this 430 or 420 crawler. And sure enough, come to find out, I went and put it together correctly. Yay! Except for one little thing. This fuel inlet fitting right here, I'm supposed to unscrew it, and there's actually a screen on the inside of here that I need to clean out. And I can guarantee you, with as bad as this thing was, and as bad as the fuel line was, and as bad as this fuel tank was, yeah, I need to take this off and clean that screen and put it back in. So that's no big deal. I can get that taken care of pretty easily. Just, you know, one more thing to do. And when I went out to reassemble the float, or the fuel filter, here's the little fuel filter on here, and the glass bowl, it's got a little stainless steel screen, it's got a cork gasket to it, and when I was putting that together, I saw this. That's rust. And it got a little rust over here. And got a little rust over here. And it's got a little rust on the other side. And it's got a little rust on the top. And one thing I've learned with antique cars, as soon as the rust starts, it doesn't stop. And since this is a 70 some odd, because it's a 1951, this is 2020, it's about 70 years old. I think I need to take care of this rust before it starts really taking off, because this is getting a little bit more than scaly. And so yeah, I've got a little bit more to do on the fuel system. And although the inside of this tank looks okay, I went and looked at the inside of it with a flashlight, and it doesn't look too bad. I'm going to go and take some chain, drop it down in here, empty a whole spray can of brake cleaner into it, and then go and shake it around so that chain can go flop around inside and kind of, you know, stir things up and scratch stuff off the sides, and see how much junk we get to come out this fitting down here. Because I really don't want to put it back rusty, and I definitely don't want to put it back with any crud in the tank. So before we put the carburetor back on it, I need to take care of this. Not going to be a tough job, but I'll definitely get a workout with a wire brush on a piece of equipment to remove all the crud. This looks like it was painted red. I may paint it red again, but the rest of it needs to be John Deere green. I went to Ace Hardware, and Ace Hardware has John Deere green and John Deere yellow. I didn't know it, but John Deere yellow is actually different than Caterpillar yellow. You can actually see the difference in color in the caps. This is more of a bright yellow than the Caterpillar is, and that's what I want. So some of the stuff on the tractor may end up being yellow, but definitely the tank and the carburetor is going to get a lick of paint from green here with the green stuff, so that it won't rust. That thing's cast iron. You know what cast iron does in the rain, right? So we're going to put a little bit of paint on it so it doesn't rust. That's the next little project. Come back and see us. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. and come on back and see a few more videos of me working on this thing.